You want to write a book, right? That's why you're here. You're looking for writing advice in its simplest form. And I want to help you write a book. What makes me qualified to give you writing advice? Well, number one, I've written more books than you have. And I know that because if you had completed books, you wouldn't be here listening to a guy who has zero commercial success. And I want to be clear about that. I cannot help you find commercial success. That's not what we're talking about here. What I want to do is just help you get over the finish line of completing your first and maybe many more books. First book, maybe many more books. And it's a daunting task for people, right? Like it's not easy, and I often ask myself this question: why? And I ask other writers, why? Why does this not seem simple? Why doesn't it seem like an easy thing to do? Why is the task of writing a book? Why does it feel so monumental for people? And I think it's because a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out writing, like maybe the position you're in, all fall into the same trap and they all make the same mistake. And I want to talk about that today because at the end of the day, if you take nothing else away from this, understand that all I want you to do to write your first book is to write it. That's it. Just write. I'm sitting next to 10 manuscripts over here for books that I've written. I self-published a couple of them, but I just like to write. If there's one thing that I could do over in the process of writing my first book, it would be to write it again, because I had a gas writing it. It was so much fun. And it's because at that time, I didn't know the first thing about writing. Now, when I say I didn't know the first thing about writing, what I mean is I didn't know the first thing about commercial writing as we understand it. I didn't know what, novels had to be a certain word count. And I didn't know how to structure a story. I didn't know how to really write dialogue. I just wrote the damn thing. And in doing so, in having a lack of knowledge and just sort of this naivety, I was able to crank out a bunch of books in a really short span of time and have a lot of fun doing it. I have to say, one of the more frustrating things about the writing community, as maybe you've found, because maybe you've reached out into the writing community and connected with some people, and you find that there's always sort of this downtroddenness to writers, where it seems like everybody is always on the verge of giving up, and I don't understand why. Maybe you just don't like writing anymore, and that's fine. I've had a bunch of hobbies that over the years I would start one and I'd be like, it's just not for me anymore. I used to throw axes competitively. I was an axe thrower, and it was a good time until I just realized it just wasn't for me anymore, and I walked away from it. Maybe writing is just a hobby for some people, and they one day decide that it's not for them anymore, and they move on. And that's okay. But if you consider yourself a writer, you should be writing. And you shouldn't really be thinking about it. You shouldn't be, putting a ton of this sort of agonizing pressure on yourself to write the perfect first draft or whatever it is that you're pressuring yourself to do. Because I'm going to say this right now, nobody has written a perfect first draft. It doesn't happen. You are an excellent writer. You have a great story to tell. I believe that. I cannot wait to hear about your story. The reason that I haven't heard about it yet, though, is because you haven't written it yet. And maybe you are caught up in this, I need every word to be perfect, or you want to create the most epic first draft of all time. Again, I think you're an awesome writer, but your first draft is not that good. Nobody's is. This is coming from a guy who wrote a first draft and thought it was impeccable. I thought I'd written the perfect first draft of a 300,000 word novel. I was wrong about that. But you know what the great thing about it was? Because I wrote so uninhibitedly. Because I didn't bother myself with trying to write the right way, I had a great clay to work from to shape, the eventual statue that would become the works that I put out into the world. And it's a weird metaphor, but I want to sit with this for a second, and I want you to think about this for a moment, because again, this isn't about being commercially successful at writing. If you want to learn how to become commercially successful at writing, how to like sell books and how to get an agent and all that, that's a different video. It's not this one. This is a motivational moment to tell you you can finish your manuscript. You have a story to tell. And it's a great story because it's your story. But this is the important thing to remember. What we're talking about here is the art of writing. And I truly believe that there is no wrong way to pursue any kind of art. Now let's be clear. There are some conditions where there is a right and wrong way to write something. For example, a research paper. There is arguably a right and wrong way to do that. Or maybe you're writing something for a class, or even a creative writing class, and there's a very specific kind of assignment that you're supposed to execute on. There are right and wrong ways to do that, but when you write just for your own edification, when you write as a form of art and a form of self-expression, there just isn't a wrong way to do that. And if you're stuck on your manuscript, if you're having a despondent moment where you feel like you can't do it, it's probably because you're pressuring yourself to do something that you are not. And I want to give you a couple of examples of this. I want to stick on this art metaphor for a moment because I think it's really important. Let's think outside the box of writing literature, and let's consider two pieces of music. Let's talk about Mozart's Requiem and The Weeknd's Bright Lights, or Lights, maybe it's just called, Blinded by the Lights. There's a really, really cool song by The Weeknd. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Go take a moment, pause here, go listen to both of them. Listen to Mozart's Requiem and listen to Lights by The Weeknd. And take a moment, I want you to sit with both of them. I'll wait. Go ahead. These are long songs. I might get up and make myself a decaf. Okay, have you listened to both? So let's start with where they're similar. They're both pieces of music, similar there. They're both kind of moody and dark, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily say that these are super uplifting. They're impactful maybe, but they have that moodiness to them, and they're both arguably skillfully executed, but even that is up for debate. Skill can be measured. Creativity cannot so much be. If I were to ask you which of these two songs is more skillful, we're probably inclined to say Mozart, right? Because he was a genius. And not to say that The Weeknd isn't. The Weeknd is a genius of our time, but strictly from a musical savant standpoint, Mozart is kind of in another league. Okay, but if I were to ask you the question, which one's better? That's a broader term, or a broader way of thinking about things. Better is highly subjective, because art is highly subjective. Just because we're talking about two things that are similar in a lot of ways, they're a piece of music that has a dark, moody feel, that does not mean that one is objectively better than the other. It is completely a matter of the audience that's receiving it. And this is the great thing about art, and why you just need to write, why you just need to create. You're probably trying to write like someone else. You're probably trying to write in a voice that is not yours. You're probably trying to write in a way that is a skill that you may not necessarily possess, or you're trying to emulate a particular style, and you need to stop doing all of that. What you need to do is write, because your authentic writer's voice is what's going to make a story compelling. You are never going to be as good at being J.R.R. Tolkien as J.R.R. Tolkien is. Why? Because he's the only one who can be him. You're never going to be a better writer than me of my material, because I'm the only one that can write my material in the kind of voice that I write it in. Your writer's voice is informed by so many things. It's an internal dialogue that goes on, inside your skull, and it's shaped by your experiences in the world, experiences that I don't have. I can't write your story. No one can write your story except you. And when you start to loosen up on the kind of pressures and constraints that you are putting on yourself to write in a particular style, to sound like another author, or to sound, in a certain voice, and just write in your voice, what I promise you're going to find is that the writing comes easier. And it's something that you are eminently proud of. I can go back and look at my early manuscripts, and there are so many things that I would probably do differently if I were to write them again today, because I've developed a little bit more skill along the way. But one thing that I won't change, or would never want to change, is the authenticity of the voice of those pieces. I wrote them in my voice. You need to write your story in your voice. Let's do one more little thought experiment here before my decaf gets cold, and let's try one other kind of way of thinking about this, similar to you go listen to these two songs. I want you to think about two pieces of literature. Since we've already used Tolkien, we'll use him on one side, and let's use 50 Shades of Grey on the other. Which one's better? You see why that's a weird question? You might be able to make an argument that one is written in a more skillful way than the other, or that one is structured in a more cohesive manner than another. You cannot make an argument for which is better than the other, because it's all about the audience receiving it. Your work, your writing has an audience. You have an amazing story to tell. Like I said, I can't wait to read it. Look, I'm down to like one book over here. I need more books to read. Please hurry up and finish writing yours, because I want to read it. I want to read your story. There are people out there that want to read your story. They can't do that unless you finish writing it, as I've said before. The takeaway here is you need to just write. I know that sounds hard, but again, it probably sounds hard because you're putting undue pressures on yourself to be something that you're not. My challenge to you, to get your writing kickstarted again, and I've got a few more things that I want to talk about. I'm gonna give you a couple of videos to spark the brain and to pull you out of whatever like little block you're in. But the thing that I want you to walk away from any of these with, the number one point that you need to really internalize, is stop trying to write just right, and just write. It's going to make a whole lot more sense when you see it written out below, but I'm going to say it again. Stop trying to write just right, and just write. There's no other way to write other than to write. And the best way to write is in your voice, as you. That's what people want to hear. That's what people are going to find compelling. I promise. Because there's no right or wrong way to do this. Don't get caught up in, can I write this way? Can I write that way? Should I be thinking about, the sequel before I finish that? Stop. Stop all of that. Stop trying to write just right. Just write. I am so excited for whatever you're about to create, because I know it's going to be something amazing.